Hey everybody, welcome to Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. My name is Reed with Best Made Videos. We are a wedding videography company based out of West Seattle, Washington, and I am joined today by Stefanie Wright of Forever Events, Weddings, and Event Coordination. And Stefanie, thank you so much for coming in. Why don't you tell us who you are and a little bit about what you guys do?
Sure. Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in your podcast. I appreciate it. Yes, my business is Forever Events, Wedding and Event Coordination. I am a full-service wedding and event planner. I am located in Bothell, and I go all over Washington State, all over the country, all over the world, wherever parties and events might take me. I've had my business in Washington for about 8.5 years, and before that, I worked and lived in Southern California. And I have been married for 10 years myself. This year, my husband and I celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, and we also celebrated 20 years together as a couple. So I got to plan my own vow renewal this year, and we also now have a 3-year-old son.
Well, that's very exciting. Well, congratulations on the anniversary. And so when you got married, before your vow renewal, when you got married, how did that go? How did that planning go?
It's funny because I was never growing up someone who dreamt about planning my own wedding. I really didn't give it much of a thought until my husband decided to propose to me after we'd been dating for 9 years. He proposed, and so then I was tasked with planning my own wedding. So my wedding planning story is a little interesting because I actually planned 2 weddings for myself. So first, we got engaged in Jamaica in June, and we had planned to get married in April of the following year. We were and are scuba divers, so we love Catalina Island. We were living in Southern California at the time, so we were going to get married on Catalina. So I planned our entire wedding to take place on Catalina Island. And then due to circumstances kind of beyond our control, that plan had to change. So in October of that year, we had to scrap the whole Catalina plan, and then we planned our wedding for January in Long Beach. So I actually planned my wedding in 3 months. So I planned 2 weddings in 6 months. And so it ended up being very different than what our original plan was. But we ended up getting married on a Thursday night in Long Beach at a venue on the shores next door to the Queen Mary. And then my entire family that had traveled for the wedding ended up all taking a cruise together. So it was a little bit of an interesting experience, but it showed me that I can plan a wedding in 3 months. It was kind of cool. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it ended up being great. Our wedding was wonderful. So,
and were you doing wedding planning at the time that you guys got engaged, or?
I was doing event planning. At the time that we got engaged, I was doing more nonprofit work and some private parties, and I had a little bit of experience with weddings, but I wasn't at that time, 10 years ago, what I would consider a wedding planner like I do now. And again, because I didn't really have much of an idea of what I had wanted for my wedding, it was, I didn't feel a lot of pressure as like a wedding planner to, have any kind of expectation from my family. I was very happy with the way our wedding turned out, but I wasn't coming from the idea of like, I'm a wedding planner, and so let me plan my wedding. It was a little different. My experience with events at that point had been like corporate and nonprofit and fundraisers and things like that. So, which you get a little bit of, it's definitely event planning as in logistics and decor and ideas, but I didn't become what I would consider to be officially a wedding planner until I moved to Washington a couple of years later.
But the wedding went off successfully, you guys.
It was successful. One of the reasons is because I had a day of coordinator. So even though I was experienced with event planning, I knew myself enough to know that I needed to hand the day off to someone else. So the day actually went off wonderfully. It was, it's funny because we got married in January, which is like something that doesn't really happen in Washington. But because we were in SoCal, we got married outdoors at night in January, and had a wonderful cocktail party reception. And I had a friend of mine who had actually taken event planning courses with me, who was my day of coordinator. So she handled everything and made sure I was able to enjoy being a bride. instead of shift into event planner mode, which is what I always do. So she let me kind of relax and she took the day. So it was successful. It was a good experience.
So you guys were down in SoCal, scuba diving. Talk about that.
Talk about scuba diving.
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
My hubby and I have been together for 20 years. So we've had a lot of adventures along the way. So one of the things we decided to do together was to become certified as scuba divers. So we learned how to dive off of the shores of LA beaches, and we took a couple trips to Catalina. We've gone diving in, I think, Mexico, in the Caribbean, in Costa Rica. So it's something that we can enjoy doing together and kind of can incorporate into our travels, which is really cool. So when you can kind of come from a perspective of, oh, let's go to this place so that we can see what the diving is like. Like it's kind of a cool way to be able to experience things. Scuba diving is amazing. The certification process was a little scary. The first time that we went to get certified, our dive master was an old, I think he had been like an ex-Navy SEAL or something. So he was kind of like really kind of grizzled and hardcore. And on the first day, he talked about all the different ways that we could die. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. But then we switched instructors and he was much more like cool and laid back and made it much less scary. So then it was really fun and enjoyable. And it's something that we really still enjoy doing together.
And so you guys still dive now?
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
Where's the next on the bucket list for that?
For diving?
Yeah.
We have actually never gone diving in Hawaii. We've been to Hawaii multiple times. We honeymooned on Kauai. We just did our vow renewals in Maui, but we've never gone diving there. So, and it's such the perfect place for it. We snorkel, but still haven't gone scuba diving. So I think Hawaii is definitely, we've been there like 6 times and have never gone diving there. So next time for sure. Every time we leave, we're like, we really should have gone diving. So next time I think we definitely need to make the diving happen.
How did you meet your husband?
So there's 2 stories. We used to tell people that we met at Knott's Berry Farm, but that wasn't true. We actually met online. So I met my husband when I was 16 on America Online.
Wow.
So this is back in the 90s when we were paying per minute to be online.
And you get the discs.
Yes, you get the CDs of 500 free minutes and all that stuff. So we actually met randomly in a Beatles chat room. So we had a shared love of the Beatles at the time, and we were just online friends, and we eventually started talking on the phone. And we eventually met in person, and we eventually became a couple. So it was funny because at the time, the online thing was just kind of reserved for nerds. So we didn't really tell people that we met online because that wasn't really a thing back in the 90s. It's, way before Match.com and all that. We officially met on America Online in a Beatles chat room.
That's wild, because when you said, we met online, I thought, well, because I met, Dorothy and I met on Match, but I go 20 years ago. I said, I don't think Match was around 20 years ago. Wow, that's wild. And then you dated for 10 years before you got engaged.
We dated for almost 10 years before we got engaged, yeah. And then, it just was time when it was time. So we got engaged in Jamaica. My husband proposed. And I was still surprised. We've been together for 10 years. And he wrote me a song and got down on one knee and proposed. And I was in tears. And it was a lovely experience. We got my engagement ring in Jamaica and then incorporated all of the things that we had, that were us as a couple into our wedding. So there's lots of Beatles music at our wedding.
Oh, really?
We met because of the Beatles. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so funny. And then talk about this vow renewal. So then 10 years later.
Yeah. So we did our vow renewal actually on the anniversary of the day we started dating 20 years ago. So March 6th of this year was 20 years for us. So we had decided that, it was 10 years married, 20 years together, and really wanted to mark the occasion. I wasn't just going to let it come and go and not acknowledge that it's pretty significant to not only have been married for 10 years, but to have been together for 20 years. So we planned our vow renewal on the beach in Maui. We went to Maui for the first time 2 years ago and absolutely fell in love with it. So we had my husband's aunt traveled with us to help us with our kiddo because he's 3. So it was just the 2 of us and our son and his aunt. And I found an amazing officiant who was a native Hawaiian, and he performed our vow renewal and kind of incorporated native Hawaiian song and some culture and wording. And we had bare feet in the sand at sunset, and it was amazing.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's good that your son could be there. And
it was great.
Kind of get the whole gang together. Mm-hmm. So was it stressful planning that? I mean, it sounds like it was a little, did you feel like you had standards now that you were like a wedding planner and an expert and all that? Or did you just kind of just want to make it a special moment?
I definitely wanted it to be special. I wanted it to feel appropriate for us as a couple. I didn't really have any expectation on what other people were going to think. It was much more about what was going to resonate with us as a couple. So I wanted to find an officiant that felt like a good match. My husband and I are really interested in kind of native cultures. Wherever we travel, we're definitely interested in getting kind of the local native experience and history. So we wanted to honor that in Hawaii by getting someone who was really a part of that culture. And I know that our officiant could trace his Hawaiian roots back to one of the first queens in Hawaii, which is really cool. So we wanted to incorporate that. And then we just kind of wrote our vows to each other and talked about what our journey has been over the 20 years we've been together. And it was pretty easy to put together because it was just the 4 of us. And then he and I just went to dinner afterwards and relaxed and just, walked on the beach and enjoyed each other's company. But the ceremony itself was really what was important to me. Like I wanted it to reflect us even more so now. Our wedding ceremony was definitely a reflection of who we were as a couple then. And so I wanted our vow renewal to be the same. So,
one thing I'm always interested in, I always say like I became a better wedding vendor, whatever, having gone through that process. Now having been with your husband 20 years, planned the wedding, got married, raising the family. Do you think that helps you, resonate with couples, or does that talk about like kind of how that relates now to working with clients and things like that?
Sure. I think being a bride definitely helped me appreciate what my brides and couples go through. I think the challenges of being a bride were all about kind of the interpersonal experience of what it was to plan a wedding. And everybody had opinions. And in our case, we had to change our plans mainly because of unavailability of family. So family had a big impact on my experience of being a bride and planning my wedding. So, and I think if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't necessarily have an appreciation for what couples go through as far as, the logistics of a wedding are easy for me. I always say I can plan my wedding in my sleep. I plan my wedding in 3 months. The logistics are not what the challenge is for me. The challenge was, and I think the challenge is for a lot of couples, and they may not even realize it until they get into planning a wedding, is not only do you have to figure out who you are as a couple and what you want your wedding day to look like, but then you have all these other thoughts and opinions coming from friends and family, and your parents might have one idea of what you should do and your friends have another idea. So being able to kind of juggle and incorporate everybody's opinion into this one day can be a lot of what stresses people out, I think. So my experience on my wedding day, I think, has definitely helped me to appreciate what it is to plan your own personal wedding. And then I've planned a lot of personal parties and family weddings since then, and that still all comes into play. So having a real kind of hands-on experience and really be able to understand what it is from their side, not just from logistics, but from, the point of view of the couple in the center of kind of this wedding madness has been really helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, when Dorothy and I got engaged, I mean, her parents are like pretty easygoing, and they've always just been really kind of whatever. And then, we had talked about like, oh, we'll do like a destination wedding down in Mexico. Like we'll just, cause we used to go down to a resort down there. And, when I went and met with them and was like, hey, I'm going to marry Dorothy, what do you guys think? And they're like, hey, so about that, like wedding in Mexico. And like, I could see, I told Dorothy, I said, I saw the tears in your mom's eye, and I said like, we didn't know that that was such a thing for them. But then obviously, like, you have to incorporate in, like you said, like all these other things that are even bigger than what you want necessarily. So
Absolutely.
So before you got into, your wedding company now, Forever Events, what were you doing before in terms of event planning and things like that you mentioned?
So I kind of had been involved with party planning or event planning ever since the first job that I had at 15.
Which was?
I was in the marketing department of an auto auction in Las Vegas, which is my hometown. So I worked in marketing in for a couple of different companies and a couple of different jobs, because originally when I graduated high school and was going to go to college, I thought that that's where I wanted to be in kind of marketing and advertising. But I realized as I kind of went through a couple of those jobs that what I was really drawn to was the event planning aspect of marketing and advertising. I worked in a PR department for a while, and what I loved about that more than the PR was the event planning that we got to do for product launches and client promos and things. So I eventually, in my mid-20s, started working for a nonprofit organization. It was a nonprofit botanic garden in Southern California, and I was in their development and membership department. And what we did, in addition to development and membership and kind of procuring members to support the garden, as we did all the event planning for those departments. And that is really where I realized that events was where I wanted to be. I was simultaneously going to college, and I kind of took my time because I put myself through school. So I took a little bit longer than most people because I had to work and live and pay for a place to live and school at the same time. So when I was going to college, I had started first majoring in communications with an emphasis in kind of marketing. And then I shifted into a little bit of PR as I got that experience. And then when I started working for the Botanic Garden and really getting my hands on events, I shifted my focus again into special event planning. So by the time I graduated, I was kind of fully on board with the development department in implementing all of their major fundraising events and member events. And I graduated with a degree in communications with an emphasis in public relations and special event planning, and a minor in journalism. And so I eventually became the event planner for the Botanic Garden. Out of that experience, I got certification as an event specialist, which was in both corporate events and meetings management, as well as weddings and social events. And I started working independently as an event planner at the same time as I was working for the garden. So it kind of just developed organically as I had different jobs and different experiences and really honed in on what I was interested in. But the event planning was definitely what kind of sparked my passion, and I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I really enjoyed the creativity of it. I really enjoyed the logistics and just everything that was involved in having to make an event happen. So it started as kind of nonprofit events is where I consider my official start to be, because I was working on the big annual gala fundraisers and the higher directors level events for the nonprofits. And then when I moved from Southern California, after my husband and I got married, we moved up to Washington in 2009. And I got connected to the Snohomish Wedding Guild really early on, just by happenstance. I met them at a wedding show, and they invited me to come check it out. And I joined, and that brought me fully into the wedding world. So I had already been working independently as an event planner for nonprofits and kind of private party, smaller events. And then once I moved to Washington, I was like, okay, I really love weddings. I'd had a little bit of experience with weddings in SoCal. So joining the guild just kind of moved me fully into that. And so I became wedding and event planner. So I was doing all of the above and still do.
What brought you guys up to Washington?
So it's kind of a funny way that it happened. So my family's from Las Vegas. My family's been in Las Vegas for almost 50 years. So we're old school, like old Vegas before, had all the Disneyland type stuff that it has now. So my one of my aunts decided to move up to Washington with her husband. His job, I think, brought him up here. And so they moved about 20 years ago. And so the rest of the family would come up in the summers. They moved to Marysville, and we would come up and visit them. And then when Vegas kind of crashed in 07, 08, more of my family decided that they wanted to take that opportunity to make the move. So my sister, my mom, my cousins just kind of slowly started migrating up to Washington. At the same time, totally coincidentally, my husband, who's an IT consultant, got assigned to Boeing on a temporary assignment, which ended up being 2 years. So he ended up just happening to work at the Everett location for Boeing. He ended up renting an apartment in Bothell as my family was moving up here. So when we got married, it came time for us to buy a house. And we tried and failed 3 times to buy a house in LA. So then he said, what about Washington? And at first I was like, no, I like the sun. I'm from the desert. I'm not doing that. But then we started looking, and more of my family was up here. And I said, okay, let's start looking. And I found our house in Bothell and fell in love. And I said, okay, let's do it. So we made the move and have not regretted it at all. We love Washington. He's a snowboarder. I have definitely acclimated. I was just in Vegas yesterday, actually. We traveled down. We have a cabin in Utah. I was 117 degrees. So I'm like, yeah, I'm okay here now. I've got the desert heat out of my system, and we love being here now. So glad to have made the move.
What was it like growing up in Vegas, being a local?
It's funny because I think a lot of people have this idea of Vegas is like very, Vegas-y casino-based experience. But other than the things that are a little different about having the strip be a thing, and having casino, like slot machines in the grocery stores, it's pretty normal. Like it's pretty much a traditional experience. Vegas is kind of a small town, which is funny because when I was growing up, it was a town of about 1 million people, but everybody kind of knew everybody. It was kind of weird. My dad was a salesman, and he knew kind of everybody all over town. And, we would occasionally, he'd get comped to go to a show, or we would go, eat at the buffets. But other than that, it was just kind of life as usual. But I wasn't really aware of certain things. Like it's such a 24-hour town that when I moved to California, I was like, why did things close here? Like it was a learning experience of like, oh, there's not like a grocery stores open like all hours of the day and night. And I can't walk around with a drink and like stuff like that. So, but I love Vegas. It has changed a lot, and it's really hot, and I don't think I could ever live there again, mainly because I'm not like a lizard person anymore. But, it's my hometown, so it has a special place in my heart.
So then when you moved to SoCal for school?
I moved to SoCal for my husband. So when we met online, I was in Vegas and he was in California. So I eventually ended up moving there because of him, and I ended up going to school there too. I did 1 year at UNLV in Vegas, and then I moved and ended up graduating from Cal Poly in California.
What was that like?
It was great. I mean, it was close enough to where I could drive back and see my family a lot, but then I was living independently and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, in my different jobs and school, and just being a young person kind of trying to figure out what I was about and what I wanted to do. And, he and I were madly in love and just young, broke kids trying to make it happen. So it was great.
You had mentioned, and I saw on your site about being certified event specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that, and what was that experience like, and what does that mean?
So really what it meant at the time was I went through, as I kind of got the feeling for events being what I really wanted to pursue, I had some experience being able to do hands-on because of the jobs that I'd had and because of my position at the Botanic Garden. But I really wanted to study and see, what it was that I was missing. So there was a certification coursework actually through a program at my university that was specifically about gaining more knowledge and hands-on planning and events. So it was coursework in corporate events and meetings management. So we really focused on what that is all about and what corporate events look like and the logistics involved with that. And then the other aspect was weddings and social events. So the goal was to kind of give an overall view of the different types of events out there. These are the different elements, the different logistics, and kind of create this overall program of once you've gone through all this coursework and certification, now you are an event specialist. So it was really helpful. I think that the most helpful thing, though, was my hands-on experience. Like, as I did more events, as I was exposed to different types of events, any level of schooling can't really make up for hands-on experience. So I definitely credit my, even from 15, when I was able to do events for the marketing department and have that experience and exposure, I think that was part and parcel of what gave me the real idea of what it is to be an event planner. I liked the schooling, but hands-on was definitely, you can't really know what it is until you do it.
Do you want to talk any more about your 15-year-old job? I mean, when I was 16, I was, doing the fryer at Arby's.
Oh.
So, I mean, this seems like maybe a little bit more. What was that like working at such a young age like that?
Sure. So my mom actually was the one who brought me into that job. She was the marketing department manager at the auto auction. And so when I was looking to work, she offered me a job, and I said, yeah, that's great. So I worked in marketing. We did some of the event planning for the department. We did kind of dealer-focused weekly and monthly events, promotional events. And then it was an auto auction, so I worked the block. I was a block clerk and got to know the dealers and see the cars come through and be a part of the auto auction, which was really cool. And then I worked for Blue Moon Communications, which was a marketing and advertising company, and I got to do marketing and promotional events for new home builders because that's who their clientele was. I worked for a Japan travel bureau for a while as an early job because I majored in Japanese in high school. So I got that experience. So yeah, I kind of got to skirt the whole like fast food industry, early teenage job thing, and was always in like administration or marketing or kind of office type things. And pretty much every job also happened to have an event aspect to it as well. So it kind of was lucky that it organically happened that way.
That's fascinating. Do you retain any of that like automobile knowledge, or did you, have you kind of catalog, the Japanese? Do you kind of have all this now in your back pocket?
I have a little bit of Japanese in my back pocket. I took it in college too, and then I kind of didn't pursue it after that. I wish I had, because now I'll watch like a movie that's in Japanese, and I was like, oh, I kind of know what they're saying, but I wish So I don't know. I have this dream someday that I'll get back into it and re-up on my Japanese training. And the auto auction experience was just kind of a cool thing to see. Any kind of live auction it's really fast paced. It's really fun to witness. It's just kind of a unique experience. So I have seen a couple of like shows that do kind of live auction stuff. And what's funny is that now I do auctions in a completely different way, because I do nonprofit events where we're doing actual live, like silent and live auctions. So the word auction has been in my repertoire for a while, just in different capacities. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's I do enjoy. We do, I'll go film whatever, and it is fun. You kind of, at least up here, there's a couple of regular, auction callers, I guess, or whatever, and you kind of see them, and it's kind of fun. It's fun. Like if you're even like Dorothy's school had, an auction, and we got to go, and she did the thing where it's like the last person to put up the $50 gets a gift certificate. Yep. But she didn't realize that when they wasn't her, that they were still charging her.
Oh, yep.
So it was about the third time, and I was like, that's $20 every time. I think she's like, I just thought it was. I go, no. That's how that works.
That's how they get you. Yep.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're up in Washington. Talk about joining the Guild more.
Yeah. So I attended one of the wedding shows in the spring of 2010, right when we'd first moved up. I knew that I wanted to bring my business up to Washington, and I knew that I wanted to continue in events, and I kind of had an inkling that I was interested in weddings as well. I actually helped plan my cousin's wedding. The month that I moved to Washington is the month that she got married. So my very first introduction to Washington was through her wedding. She got married at Hidden Meadows, and I was her dam coordinator, essentially. And when I met the Guild, it just so happened that Hidden Meadows was one of the Guild venues. And it was just a really good opportunity for me to step fully into the event and wedding world in Washington. You know, there's definitely a learning curve coming from a different state, and the LA event world is different than Seattle and Snohomish, and so joining the guild really helped me get to know not only what the venues were in the area, but who the vendors were, get to make personal connections with people, really brought me fully into the world of weddings and events in general. And it was kind of instrumental in what let me bring my business up here so early and kind of hit the ground running so quickly and successfully, is that I had the guild as a resource, and I went to all the meetings and I was getting to know all the people, and joining the guild has really been instrumental in supporting my business. So it's been great. I've been in the guild now for 8 years, and I know a lot of people, and we've worked together a ton. And I branched out to the other organizations as well, and NACE and ILIA and all of that. But the guild was kind of my first introduction to what it is to be a wedding in Washington, which again is different. You know, there's a lot less attitude in Washington and Seattle than there was in Southern California, which I appreciate. And vendors were a lot more friendly and easy to work with, and definitely interested in the couple. You know, there can be a lot of ego and attitude in LA, and it's more about the vendor than it is about the client. And up here, especially in the world of weddings, it tends to be, it's much more about the couple. Like, that's what everybody's there for. And most everybody that I've met has really been on the same page as far as they do it because they love it. They do it because they have the right intentions. They want to help the couple have a good day. So I've met a lot of great people and vendors, and have had a lot of good experiences because of the guild.
Yeah, I'm like the worst guild member. I think I've been to one meeting in like 2 years.
It's time to come to another meeting.
I know. Dan Manning always messages me, I think every month before. He goes, "Hey man, looking forward to seeing you come." And I go, "Yeah, we live in West Seattle, and it's 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hike.
It's like a 2-hour commute."
Yeah.
That is interesting. You talk about the vendors. I remember when I went to the wedding MBA last year, like a lot of videographers were doing all these talks and stuff, but talking about kind of like you said, like the egos and like, you know, fighting with the photographers. And like, I'm in like nationwide, wedding videographer groups too. And like, they're always talking about that, like, oh, I was fighting with the photographer. And like, it's really not that way here at all.
Yeah.
It really is. Like you said, it really is kind of about the couple. And like,
yeah,
I mean, maybe 1 out of 100, there might be, I don't know, but for the most part, there's never really any issue. And I think that's interesting. Was there any other big differences between the LA scene and here?
Another thing that I noticed, and especially 10 years ago when I moved up here, there was a bit of a learning curve as far as educating couples as to what a wedding planner was all about. The idea of a party planner or an event planner or a wedding planner has been around in LA for a long time. But coming up here, I definitely encountered, especially in my first couple of years of business, a lot of couples who really didn't understand what we did. Like, what does that mean? What does a wedding planner even do? Like, why do I need you? Like, and it's changed over the 10 years, I'd say. There's been a lot more education for couples about what a wedding planner is all about. But when I first moved up here, I kind of had an expectation of, everyone would know what an event planner is. And I was like, oh, no, not necessarily. Like, people, you know what a wedding is, and you know that you need a venue and you need a photographer. But the idea that there's a person that can actually help you plan wasn't known as much, I would say, at that time. So that was another difference that I had noticed between SoCal and up here.
Yeah, I've said that planners before, like, I always think that that's probably the hardest job that, for you to try to educate people, like, because, people do get married, like, without, a planner or videographer, but like, just because like you got married at the end of the day, like, does not mean that could not have gotten a lot better or gone a lot better.
Right.
We had a reception on Friday, and, their sister was the, coordinator, just kind of dubbed that. And we were an hour and a half late, the entire night, everything, like everything, standing, waiting to cut the cake, standing, trying to figure out who's giving toast, finally. But, I mean, they got married, and
Yeah.
it was, I mean, and we were there, and food and people danced, but that did not mean that, like, if they did not have somebody that was much more qualified in that position, that couldn't have gone a lot smoother for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I always tell couples, of course you can get married without a planner. You certainly can. People do all the time. People do every day. People did, 20 years ago before it was really a thing. Weddings happened every day. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it's going to be the difference in not only the experience of the couple not having to worry about anything on the day. When there's an absence of a planner or a day of coordinator, that means that anything that comes up, someone has to deal with. Either it's the bride or the groom, or the couple, or it's the wedding party, or it's the parents. Having a planner means that hopefully everybody that's supposed to be enjoying the day gets to enjoy the day, and that things run on time, and that those transitions are smooth, and that your guests' experience is more comfortable because everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. So, yeah, for sure, weddings can happen without it, but I wouldn't recommend it.
It's interesting your timing coming up to Washington with the Guild, and also with kind of the Snohomish County kind of weddings. Like, you really were kind of in the impetus or the beginning of that whatever thing, right? Because like Snohomish wedding community, even just outside of the Guild, just in terms of like the venues and kind of the culture up there, and all the different places and stuff. I mean, have you talked about just kind of that growth that you've seen, from everything up there? I mean, that's like a destination place now that people go to get married.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think when I joined the Guild, it had only been around for a couple of years, I think. And I know that it was essentially started by the venues to try to let people know that there were wedding venues in Snohomish, to kind of educate the community and couples in the area that, hey, there's a lot of options up here. It doesn't just have to be Seattle. It doesn't just have to be, what had always been known as the traditional venues. And so over the 10-ish years that I've been a part of it, definitely done a great job in promoting Snohomish as the premier wedding destination. And we've gained a lot more venues. We've gained a lot more vendors. I appreciate the Guilds because it is a good resource for me as a planner to be able to refer vendors that I know. I get to meet them face to face, and the more vendors that we have, hopefully the more opportunity that I get to meet people and get to know their personalities and what they're all about. But it has been interesting to see the change. Just the number of venues. I think in Snohomish, I think that there's like something like 25 or 30. I'm not even sure of the number, but there's so many venues when 10 years ago there was like 10. So, and as areas in kind of that northern area have been growing and expanding in general, Snohomish has just so much come into its own as a wonderful wedding destination. There's so many different types of venues. It's not just barns. There's ballrooms, there's mansions. There's so many different venues and so many different options. And I definitely, I don't work exclusively in Snohomish. I've gone all over the place, and really is all over the state. But it's been pretty cool to watch the growth of Snohomish over the years and get to know so many more businesses that have joined the Guild, and to kind of know the history of where it's been, and excited for kind of where it's going.
Yeah, it's our good friends got married at Thomas Family Farm, which is now Crossroads, and like they had just I think kind of we're getting that going. And it was one of the first weddings I had done because Dorothy was a bridesmaid. And like, so, even just kind of peripherally, I can never say that word, but for me, like, to kind of see that growth, it's just been cool, just to kind of that we have that here in the state. And I think that that's kind of interesting. So in terms now of forever events, and kind of talk about your approach to working with couples and clients, and kind of how you try to stand apart, or what your philosophy is in terms of planning weddings.
Sure. So my philosophy really is I believe in customization as much as possible from a planning point of view. So I am not really into kind of the cookie cutter packages of, choose wedding planning package A, B, or C, and, that's it. I'm very much about customizing the service and support that I offer to couples as much as I possibly can. So I always do a face-to-face meeting as much as possible, or I'll do a Skype if we are in different areas. But I always do a consultation to get to know not only what their vision is, but who they are as a couple, what's important to them on the day, what's going on in their life, that's going to affect the planning process. So if it's a couple who feels really comfortable with planning and they really are just wanting a little bit of guidance and then somebody on the day, I will definitely do that. If it's a couple who, I've had couples who are doctors. I've had couples who are going through law school, couples who don't have the time to plan a wedding. And so if they need more support, that's what I offer them. So I really want to get to know them as a couple so I can help them build a wedding that's going to reflect them and their personalities, but then also what's going on in their lives that's going to affect your planning process. So I'm all about making things as custom as I possibly can to give them the level of support that they want and need. And that is really across the board. I tell couples I can do as much or as little as you want and need me to do. I can just be there to do day of, and which is, month of, 2 month of, or you can hand me the wedding and just show up. And everything in between, which I've done a couple of times, which is actually kind of cool. Some couples are really like, I really don't have the capacity to plan this. I want to get married, like we want to get married, but I can't do it. So please do it. And I'm happy to do that. And the more that I know of who they are, the more that I could be their advocate and represent them in the decisions that are made and make sure that day is what they want it to be.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's about customization. Like really, everybody really does like approach their wedding planning differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that's because people ask me like, oh, well, like how does this work, or how do we, do we talk on the phone every day? Or I'm like, it's really up to you, right? Like, and that's having gotten married and like you, I know how we planned our wedding, and I know then that obviously other people probably do it differently, and like I know, how stressful or time crunch it was, for us to try to make decisions or like respond to people or figure out stuff. And so like, I totally like empathize now with like couples where they're like, sorry, we couldn't get back to you. And you're like, oh, dude, like I totally understand, like we got married at Salty's, which was like a mile from our house at the time when we lived up there. And I remember the lady that was, helping us with the coordination, she said, well, it's so interesting. It's so hard to get for you guys to find time to come in. Like you're so close, like it shouldn't be that hard. And I was like, you don't freaking know what we're,
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
We're like doing our best here to
Right.
try to, do it. So I do think like kind of giving people that, it's not a one size fits all. And it's
Definitely.
kind of like, what, in terms of like the types of clients like you attract, like, do you like, what kinds of words would you use to describe them, or what kind of couples do you look for, or couples that mesh well with you?
I think the couples that mesh well with me are couples who are definitely looking for a planning partner that wants to get to know them, that is interested in really meeting their needs as them as a unique individual couple, but also who's not necessarily looking for someone to bark orders and be like a taskmaster. Like I'm definitely organized. I believe in, kind of timelines and planning. I'm a planner, but I believe in being friendly and approachable and flexible and really trying to listen to what it is that my couple is saying that they need and really being available as much as possible. Sometimes to a fault, because I'm kind of available for my couples as much as I can be. And, if that means that I, have to be emailing them at 3 a.m. because there's a crisis, then I'll do that. I probably shouldn't say that, but, because I have to have a boundary somewhere. But I really want to do the best that I can to support them, and be friendly and form a relationship with them. I think that it's important to like your planner. It's important to like your vendors. It's important to have a good rapport with them. That way, through the planning process, we can be, we can communicate, we can be open and honest. They feel comfortable to tell me what's going on with them. If something's come up in their lives that is requiring, their time away from planning, they can tell me, hey, this is happening. can you please step in and do this? And I will absolutely do it because I want to, be friends as much as possible. And I think that helps throughout the planning process all up through wedding day, that they feel like they have someone who really knows them, they can trust, they can be, share this very personal day with. And so I believe in being, professional, friendly, knowledgeable, flexible, accessible. And I think that, in my personality, that tends to come through when I talk to people. And that's why I do face-to-face meetings, because I think it's important to click with the couple and that we're on the same page. And that's the vibe that they're looking for. Again, if they're wanting someone with a headset and a clipboard to like minute by minute bark orders at them, that's probably not me. I definitely believe in being a little bit more relaxed and organic. And, I believe in planning as much as possible. And then on the day, you got to go with the flow. Because, stuff happens, life happens. So, those are the kind of couples that I tend to attract and tend to seek out. Couples who are into the planning and, really excited to make it custom and personal and put all this energy into it and be excited about the planning process. And then on the day, we've planned it all as much as possible. And then they can kind of let it go and just enjoy and trust that myself and the team that we've put together are going to make that day happen to the best of our ability, and they can enjoy whatever may happen.
It is a tough balance, I think, between, trying to plan, too much and, kind of like I'll do phone, with some planners, like they'll call and like, we're trying, it's like, okay, so at 4:57 they're going to do, and then at, at 4:59 and you're like, all right, that's cool. I mean, I just, whatever. It's like, all right, we'll do it. What are there some common mistakes or things that you find couples making that are easy fixes, or things like easy like lessons that you've learned that couples kind of mistakes that they make or things that they could learn?
I think one of the lessons that I have definitely learned over my years of planning is, and I know that other planners say this all the time, hire professionals. Like we're such a DIY world right now with Pinterest and the internet, and there's so much information about, you can just do it this way, or, have a friend do that. And there's a time and a place for that, where you have an uncle with a camera who can maybe shoot your engagement party. But when it comes to wedding day, I am very much an advocate for have the professionals on board that you connect with, that are in the style that you want, that are the personality that you want, that are professional people, experienced people who are going to be able to make that day happen for you. I think it's so tempting to want to do everything yourself. But then I think that those are the weddings where you are, things happen and you're stressed, or maybe you had your uncle take your pictures and they didn't come out. And then this is like a lifelong thing you have to deal with because you're upset. Like, it's just, trusting the professionals to do the job that you're hiring them to do. And of course that comes along with knowing what your budget is and how to make that happen. A lot of what I do for couples when I meet them early in the process is to talk about what's your priority, where do we want to put, let's build a budget that makes sense for you. And then let's find the professionals that are going to fit within whatever that budget is. So, my tip is always have a planner. And then, let's really figure out what's important to you. It's really tempting to get swept up into the world of Pinterest and into the world of Instagram, into the world of this expectation of what your wedding should, quote unquote, should look like or should be. And I think it's important for couples, whether they're working with a planner or not, to really identify what's important to them. Like, it doesn't really matter what Instagram tells you is important. It's about what's actually important to you as a couple. So really kind of being honest about, what do you want this day to be? What's really important to you? What are your priorities? And then having the professionals be able to execute that for you, I think is important. Because again, Pinterest is great, but it's kind of a black hole, and it will kind of swallow couples up, and then they get lost in, I've got 500 pins of flowers and I don't know what to do. And it's kind of have to step away from it and figure out, well, really, what do you want? Like, not what the internet tells you to want. Like, what do you want? What's important to you? So that's why I'd see a lot. Like, I kind of tell couples, yes, it's really easy to get swept up into the world of planning, and it can be really fun and exciting, but it can also be really overwhelming and really stressful. So let's kind of take a step back and figure out what do you want to do? Who are you as a couple? And let's make that day happen.
It's tough. We had a bride that there were stresses, but I remember the photographer was telling me like that her Pinterest board was like all these like water scenes and like lakes and like rivers and stuff. And like, they were getting married at like a church in Federal Way. Like there's no, and she's like, I don't even know like what, I mean, there does have to be a little bit of education of like, like this is great. And like, then do we want to go to a park or do we want to try to make this be a thing? Because, in this field here, it's not, and we can get beautiful pictures here too. It's just not what you're maybe looking for or whatever. And also with the DIY thing, I do see like a lot of like couples online and stuff like, oh, we're going to do, what's the best way? And it's like, man, you're going to spend like 3 weeks trying to get these like centerpieces, or you could just, and like I said, it's time or money, and it's which one you want to spend. And some people have more time and some people have more money, but it's a tough balance.
Definitely. There's definitely a place for DIY. I just think that it's identifying, how much is your time worth? How much time do you have? If you are a couple who is, finishing law school, if you're a couple who's buying a house, you probably don't have as much time to, do a bunch of DIY projects. Maybe pick one or two that are manageable, that are going to feel really special and personal. And then again, let's find the vendor, let's find the pro that can make the other stuff happen for you. So I don't have anything against DIY. It's just being realistic about, what you're signing on to take on, because people have a life. It's not like you get to just devote a year. I'm not doing anything but planning my wedding. That's what I do. Like, that's my job. That's why I exist. But as a couple, you have a life, and you have, school and work and home and family and whatever it is. So being realistic about what you can take on in DIY and then what you want to let go and let professionals do it can be tricky to let go of some things and let go of the urge to want to DIY everything. But I think it helps de-stress a lot of the situation to be realistic about what a couple can take on. So
yeah, the example I always use, and my friend Dominic, he's fine, but he got married and I did the video, and they wanted to do their own flowers, and like he was up till 4 a.m. doing them, and they did it, and it worked, and the flowers, and they were great, but he was really tired on his wedding day, and they didn't, it wasn't right. And it's like, but they did it. I mean, it was fine and it worked, but I think he would even say like, maybe if we had gone back, we would have tried to figure out, a different, or have friends try to do it or something, than us try to be up till 4 a.m, tying boutonnieres the night of our wedding day.
Yeah. And what you don't want is to look back on your wedding day and regret the way that your time was spent. And that can be a little hard because you don't necessarily know until it's already done. But I think that's why it's important at the beginning to kind of be realistic about what you can take on. Flowers is one of those things that is so tempting to want to DIY, or let's just go to Pike's Market and do it. And I'm always like, yes, but the reality of what it's going to be to do that the day before your wedding or on wedding day. I had one bride who's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do my flowers myself. I have a little experience and it'll be really fun. It'll be me and my girls and we'll spend the day before putting them together. And I'm like, I know you think that's what's going to happen, but trust me, you're going to be busy with a ton of other things and it's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. So I was finally able to convince her to bring in a pro who I had an existing relationship with to come in and oversee that process and help and guide. Her experience was that she got to have our hand on the flowers for like 10 minutes and like give a little touch. And then of course she was busy because she was a bride and doing everything else. And she got to enjoy wedding day instead of being up until 4 a.m. So yeah, the flowers are one of those things that always gets me. I'm like, I know you think it's going to go that way, but let's please talk to a pro and understand like what you're agreeing to. So
I talked Dorothy out of doing the Pike Place flowers too. Dorothy thought we were going to do that. And I said, I don't think you're going to be driving over there the morning of to go pick up flowers and do that. And
as someone who's done flowers before, so that's something else that I kind of started doing for couples who wanted to do more DIY. I've done kind of flowers for them, and it's not something that I'm certainly not a florist, but in certain situations I've done that. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than you think that it's going to be. And I enjoy it. It's part of the design that I enjoy doing. But I don't want to be a florist. I want to be your planner, and I don't want you to be a florist. I want you to be, a couple on your wedding day. So
talk about your favorite part of the wedding process, whether it's, seeing the ceremony or meeting new couples, or what is your favorite part of the whole 9 months or year or whatever?
I have a couple of favorites. I love getting to know the couples. I love getting to know their individual stories and meeting their families, and just being able to be in part of such a special experience. And especially on the day, the time that I spend with couples throughout the planning process really helps me feel connected to them and get to know them as friends. And so when I get to see their day unfold and the emotions that come up and the wonderful, experiences that they're having and memories that they're making, feels really special. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. I also really enjoy the creativity of it. I think that that's one of the other big things that drew me into events in general, is the opportunity to get really creative and do design and figure out how you can customize things to make them feel like they represent the couple. So design and creativity is a huge part of what I love about weddings. It's different than the corporate world and the nonprofit world, and they all offer different opportunities to get creative, but weddings are so personal. Like, it's kind of the most personal thing that you can plan is, designing the different aspects of your wedding. So that's another one of my favorites. And then I'm a little bossy. So just being able to be in control of logistics and feel, exercise kind of my organizing skills and all of that. It just kind of suits me personality wise. I was the girl who was organizing plays as a kid and rounding up my cousins and sisters and neighborhood kids and making them organize things. So it kind of plays well for me now as a planner.
Perfect. Well, Stefanie, this has been so much fun getting to know you and having you come in. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
If people want to learn more about you and your company, what would you have them do and check out?
I would say come check out my website at forevereventsplanning.com. You can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram. And come check me out, send me a text, reach out in whatever way works for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of Get to Know Your Wedding Pro. Check back next week for another wedding vendor interview. Thanks so much.
Thank you.